Hello guys, welcome back. Today I'm going to be ranking my top 10 overrated NHL players. But before we get into my list, I want to know your thoughts on my list as well, but I want to know what players you think are overrated too. Now getting started on the top 10, at number 10 I have Ryan Murray of the Columbus Blue Jackets. He's a defenseman at age 24, drafted second overall in the 2012 NHL Draft, and to say he hasn't fulfilled his hype is a little bit of an understatement. In the 17-18 season, he didn't have a full, healthy season. He played 44 games, had 1 goal, 11 assists for 12 points. Pretty meh, especially for a second overall pick. Not good numbers at all. In his career, he hasn't had much better numbers. He's played 264 games, had 12 goals, 60 assists for 72 points, has had a 50 or 48% corner percentage, which is just terrible. Not the corner score, that's okay, but just the numbers in general just are not what you want from a second overall pick. Of course, right behind Neil Yakupov is not the greatest look, but we want to see a lot more from Ryan Murray. I think the Columbus Blue Jackets, while they don't need him to develop that much, again, behind Werenski and Jones, I feel like they were banging at the time that he would be very, very good. You want to see a lot more from him, and of course, we haven't. And there's a lot of people that still think he's a top 4 type guy, which I don't think at all. He's definitely not been that guy at all in the NHL yet. He might be, but at age 24, the time is really running out. At number 9, I have Ryan Strome of the Edmonton Oilers. He being the center/right winger at age 25 for the now Edmonton Oilers. He was drafted, of course, 5th overall in the 2011 NHL Draft, and of course, that's where the big expectations came for him. This past season, of course, he was traded to the Edmonton Oilers for Ryan Eberle, or Jordan Eberle. In the 17-18 season, though, he played 82 games, had 13 goals, 21 assists for 34 points, had a 58.8% corner score percentage, and that was actually a pretty good year for him, as in his career he's played 340 games, has a 58 goals, 102 assists for 160 points. So obviously, he had a little bit of a better year than he's been used to, and with Ryan Strome, he just has not put up the numbers that he was supposed to be at a 5th overall pick, and of course, when you're going between the New York Islanders and the Edmonton Oilers, two teams that are not great with development, it's pretty much a disaster for a guy like him. As a 5th overall pick, he had huge potential. He was drafted ahead of guys like Mark Scheifele, Sean Couturier. There was lots of guys ahead of him in that 2011 draft that were pretty good. That could have been are much better than him. With Ryan Strome, he had great expectations, and he was supposed to be that great guy. Coming with the New York Islanders, he just was not the guy that he was pegged to be. And this past season, he had one of the better numbers of his career, but he's just not the player that he once was. And people still think that he has that potential, which I just don't agree with. At number 8, I have Brent Seabrook of the Chicago Blackhawks, of course, the 33-year-old defenseman. He's been one of those guys that's been steadily declining in the past couple of years. He was drafted 14th overall in the 2003 NHL Draft. In the 17-18 season, that's where the big decline came. We already saw his numbers kind of declining since, you know, he hit age 30 and the Blackhawks being a little bit worse, but this is the year that it really came and we really started to see it. In the 17-18 season, he played 81 games, 1 game being when he was scratched, so he only missed 1 game there. He had 7 goals, 19 assists for 26 points. He had 51.8% corner score percentage. In his career, he's played over 1,000 games, 1,004. He's had 5 goals, 337 assists, 432 points. He has had a 52.7% corner score percentage, and he's been a good defenseman for the Chicago Blackhawks. Again, just a little bit behind Keith a couple of years. Seabrook has been a fantastic defenseman for the Blackhawks, especially in the playoffs when they won the cup, and I won't argue that. And he was a fantastic defenseman back then, 4 years ago, but the thing is, I think he's overrated now. I don't think he's really a top 4 defenseman anymore. I think people are starting to catch on to that. Last year, defensively, he was absolutely atrocious. He seemed like an NHL defenseman at some points with the Chicago Blackhawks. And even though the goaltending wasn't the best when they had Crawford out, Seabrook definitely wasn't helping anything at all. But I'd argue he's one of the more overrated defensemen now, just because people still think that he's a top 4 type guy, which I just don't agree with at all. With the defensive numbers, they don't add up. With the offensive numbers, they don't either. At number 7, I have Shea Weber of the Montreal Canadiens. Of course, another age 33 defenseman, getting up there in age for sure. And he was drafted 49th overall in a 2003 draft, the same draft as Brent Seabrook. In the 17-18 season, he played 26 games, had 6 goals, 10 assists for 16 points, had obviously a pretty banged up year, and is going to start out next season injured as well. It sucks because he played pretty decent in the games that he had last season. Offensively, I feel like he was pretty good. But of course, he just get banged up after banged up. He got like 2 injuries in a row last season. And of course, I think he had surgery this past offseason, and now he's going to miss 4 months to start off the next season. So it's not looking good for him. It's health-wise, and certainly not for the Montreal Canadiens. In his career, he's played 867 games at 189 goals, 312 assists, for 501 points, and that's a 50.8% Corsi for percentage. But the thing with me is, the thing that hit about the reliability, the thing is a little bit overrated about Shea Weber. I don't feel like the defense is quite as there in his Nashville days. I feel like he's a little bit more of a glass cannon now. The offense, he showed that a little bit in the 17-18 season, but he just was not able to stay healthy for it, and he might not be able to stay healthy next season as well, which is definitely a big concern. But the reliability, especially with injuries and just the overall defensive ability, I think is a little bit overrated there. I think the offense, he can still bring a lot of it with the slapper and the decent puck handling. But with Shea Weber, I don't think he's that top defenseman anymore, and I don't think there's an argument for that anymore. Maybe if he kept being healthy throughout the whole season, but you gotta remember, again, the Montreal Canadiens were a terrible team throughout the whole season, so his numbers were likely to even out anyways. But with Shea Weber, I just don't see him as the elite shutdown guy. He's still a pretty good shutdown guy for the Montreal Canadiens, but I don't see him as that elite, like, Mark-Edward Vlasic type level shutdown guy. The offense, I still think that he can bring it a little bit, but of course last season he did show that he can, but he just was not able to stay healthy, was not able to keep the health going, and that's a big thing. You need your number one defenseman to stay healthy, and he just has not been able to do that. At number 6, I have James Van Riemsdyk of the Philadelphia Flyers, and of course he was drafted second overall in the 2007 NHL Draft. He's a left winger / right winger at age 29, just newly signed by the Philadelphia Flyers. In the 2017-2018 season with the Toronto Maple Leafs, he played 81 games, had 36 goals, 18 assists for 54 points. He had 55.6% Corsi for percentage, and his career has played 609 games, had 201 goals, 192 assists for 393 points. He's had a 50 on the dot Corsi for percentage. And to me, I think the offense is a little bit underrated, but it's just everything about him, everything else about his game, I think is way overrated. Can he score goals at almost will sometimes? Yes, and he is a goal scorer on the power play. He's kind of a power play specialist where he can just crank it. He can score goals, he can deflect goals, he can do a lot of things on offense. But to me, everything about his game, everything else about his game is pretty lackluster. One, if you look at the defensive metrics, he was playing on one of the worst defensive lines in the league last season with Tyler Bozak. Tyler Bozak and James Van Riemsdyk, they were playing on the even strength line together for a lot of that season, and it was just deadly and not in a good way for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Defensively, it was just atrocious. They could not stop anything. And the defense, just the zone gaps and all that, it was just terrible. James Van Riemsdyk was obviously something to do with that. The defense is not his specialty either, so he's not going to bring that with the Philadelphia Flyers. That's not what he's going to be relied on. So don't expect to have that defense with him. The defense, obviously not one of his strong suits. I feel like he can bring some physicality, but that's not one of his strongest parts about his game, and I don't think he does that a lot either. When it comes down to it, he's a strong goal scorer, but you're paying him to be that goal scorer, not to be really anything else. Number 5, I have Adam Larson of the Edmonton Oilers. Of course, the defenseman at age 25, the guy that was, of course, infamously traded for Taylor Hall. He was 4th overall, picked 4th overall in the 2011 NHL Draft, right behind Ryan Strome, who was 9th on the list, of course. But in the 17-18 season, he played 63 games. He missed a few games because I think his father passed away and he needed to go just recover for a little bit. So he didn't have the full season there, but he had 4 goals, 9 assists for 13 points, had a 50.6% Corsi percentage. In his career, he's played 416 games, had 17 goals, 84 assists for 101 points, and obviously, it's not the greatest numbers for a 4th overall pick, and you definitely want to see better, at least from the defenseman there. For the New Jersey Devils and the Edmonton Oilers, his career high, I think, was with the New Jersey Devils, I think 4 years ago or something like that, but his career high in points is 24. For a 4th overall defenseman, you want to see a lot more. I mean, Cam Barker has one season where he got more points than, of course, Adam Larson, so it's not the greatest look there. For Adam Larson, of course, traded for Taylor Hall, that put even more expectations on him. Not even being a 4th overall pick, that had a ton of expectations already, but to be traded for a Taylor Hall, the 1st overall pick, he had a lot of expectations to fill what the Edmonton Oilers needed. And while I feel like he's been decent defensively for the Edmonton Oilers the last couple of years, I don't think he's been that shutdown guy that the Edmonton Oilers truly need. I feel like they could use somebody like a Vlasic, and while that's hard to get those guys, Adam Larson is okay at that, but I don't think he's great at that. I think the Edmonton Oilers need someone that's great at that. Adam Larson is just not that guy. And it sucked because, of course, Edmonton Oilers needed that type of guy, but Adam Larson I just don't think fits that bill. I think he's an okay top 4 defenseman. He can bring some offense when he's really at his prime, but to me, we just haven't seen that offense yet. We haven't seen that offensive ability, and I think he still has. And I think the Edmonton Oilers definitely overrated him when they traded for him for Taylor Hall. That was ridiculous, and obviously looking back on it, it was a terrible trade for them. At number 4, this is a little bit of a controversial pick, but at number 4, I have Ryan Johansen of the Nashville Predators, and just give me a second to explain here, alright? He's, of course, at age 26, the center/right winger for the Nashville Predators. He was one of the guys swapped. He was the one guy swapped for Steph Jones in the Steph Jones-Ryan Johansen trade. In the 17-18 season, he played 79 games, had 15 goals, 39 assists for 54 points, had a 53.0% corsi percentage. His career, he's played 512 games with the Columbus Blue Jackets and the Nashville Predators. He's had 116 goals, 226 assists for 342 points. Now, Steph Jones is my favorite defenseman right now and my favorite Eastern Conference player, so I'm a little bit biased here, but that trade was terrible for the Nashville Predators, and I know, even though they need to get rid of that defenseman, they were just chock full of it. They did not get the best center available, I do believe that, and Ryan Johansen is decent, but I don't think he's the first-line guy, the first-line center that I think that Nashville really wanted and really needed when they got him. I think he played well in the 16-17 season, the year that they made the Cup final before he was injured, but this past season I didn't see enough from him. I just did not see that first-line type guy that the Nashville Predators needed from him, and luckily the Nashville Predators had a lot of guys that were breaking out, a lot of guys that really did not need him to succeed, so the Nashville Predators were still very, very good and were one of the best, I think the best team in the league, but they didn't need Ryan Johansen to develop in that first-line guy, but he just ended up not being that guy. He ended up being like a second-line guy for them, and not even a center. He ended up playing a lot of his time on the wing, so it was really just a terrible trade for them that didn't end up really working out for them either, and Ryan Johansen was obviously not the player that they wanted and pegged to get when they actually acquired him. Two things from Ryan Johansen when they traded for him: to be a center and to be their first-line guy, their first-line center. They wanted him to be that guy, and he hasn't been either of those guys. And thankfully for the Nashville Predators, they've adapted. And Ryan Johansen is by no means a terrible player. I think he's a great player still. He has a lot of talent, but to me, he just has not shown that with the Nashville Predators as much as he probably should have. I feel like maybe he bounces back next season, and we see a better Ryan Johansen. But from last season, I was not impressed at all. I did not see what I needed to do from him. It seemed like he, at most nights, disappeared, unlike most of Nashville's team. At number 3, I have Kris Letang of the Pittsburgh Penguins, and I think that he's just a little bit overrated, as you can tell. He's at age 31, the defenseman for the Pittsburgh Penguins. He was drafted 62nd overall in 2005 draft, and for me, his just stock as a player has dropped so much over the past couple of years. In the 2017-2018 season, he played 79 games, had 9 goals, 42 assists for 51 points. Not bad at all on paper, right? 55.0% corsi percentage, which is pretty decent for a defenseman, for sure. In his career, he's played 682 games, has had 96 goals, 341 assists for 437 points. Not bad at all. Very good defensive numbers, and for him, the offense is certainly there. I'm not even exaggerating that. The offense is very, very good on his part. The turnovers are terrible, even in his own end, and in the offensive zone, he's still pretty bad at that. On the power play, he's not that great of a line driver. He can't do too much. He can pass and do that pretty well, but the turnovers are still there, and he's not the smartest player ever, and that has regressed. He's not the best decision maker, and even though he's still a decent player overall in the offense, as the numbers do suggest, the player overall has definitely regressed both offensively and defensively to the player that is obviously not a first defenseman in my eyes. At number 2, I have Tom Wilson of the Washington Capitals, and it's kind of hilarious how overrated he has become in the last year. Of course, winning the Stanley Cup in 2018, congratulations to him. He had a decent part in that, but there's a lot of things that go into it to really become one of the more overrated players in the NHL. He was drafted 16th overall in the 2012 draft. In the 17-18 season, he played 78 games, had 14 goals, 21 assists for 35 points, had a 50.4% corsi percentage. In playoffs, he was pretty decent, putting up a few goals, putting up a few assists, but he was playing along great teammates. I can't remember if he was playing power play time, but I know in the regular season he was playing with Alex Ovechkin and Nicholas Backstrom, and when Backstrom got a little bit injured, he was playing with Ovechkin and Kuznetsov, which is not that big of a downgrade. So he was playing with fantastic teammates, put up a career high in points, 35. Of course, got that hilariously big contract by the Washington Capitals, who they are going to regret, and probably next year even. And right now, he's just been at an all-time high in overratedness, just because what the Washington Capitals gave him, what they think he'll become, which I I just don't see happening. If to me, he's like the Connor Sheary of the Washington Capitals. Not in the dirtiness, but in the product. Yes, he put up some good points, and in the playoffs he was decent, but when you're playing that with Ovechkin, with Backstrom and Kuznetsov, you're going to put up points. Even I could put up points with Backstrom giving me assists. The physicality is there, yes, and he's that type of guy. But the offense, if he goes on any other line, I'm really scared for his point production. And what the Washington Capitals think he is, a $5 million type player, I'm really scared for their future with contracts like those. If they're just going to keep handing out those contracts, I mean, Roman Polak should step up next year. At number 1, this is the most obvious pick on this list, Jonathan Toews of the Chicago Blackhawks. Now, I already made a pretty, I guess, a distinct video about him. I think it was a couple months ago, where I explained, like, for about 8 minutes why he's the most overrated player in the NHL. But I still have the same opinion now, and he is the most overrated player in the NHL. At age 30, the center for the Chicago Blackhawks, he was drafted 3rd overall in the 2006 NHL Draft. In the 17-18 season, he played 74 games, had 20 goals, 32 assists for 52 points. He had 56.8% quick score percentage, but it's pretty easy to put up those numbers, especially when you're getting 57.7 ozone starts, which basically means that you're starting face-offs in the offensive zone. 57% is pretty high, and while he's a fantastic defensive player still, I won't even argue that, he's getting a lot of offensive time, and even with 53 points, it's not the greatest. It wasn't the greatest of what he's put up. I think the best he's put up is like 70 points, something around there, which for a 3rd overall pick and somebody that's a top 100 player of all time is not the greatest. He's only put up more than 70 points once in his career, and he's only put up more than 30 goals twice in his career. And of course, the Steve Dingle podcast meme, a 2-time that 30-goal scorer, Jonathan Toews, it's not the greatest career offensively, and I feel like that's the biggest overrated part about him is, yes, he's still a decent guy, but offensively, I don't think he's more than like a second-line type guy center when it comes to offense. In his career, he's played 791 games, had 292 goals, 382 assists for 674 points. And yes, that's really, really good for a lot of players, but a top 100 player of all time in NHL, the NHL definitely overrates the Blackhawks, and especially guys like Jonathan Toews. But of course, now that you know my list, I want to hear your thoughts. What do you think about my top 10, the players that I picked? And of course, what are the players that you think are overrated and the guys that get way more attention than they deserve? So that is it for today, guys. If you guys enjoyed, make sure you like and subscribe. Tell me down below, again, what are your most overrated players and what do you think of my list as well? And I'll see you guys later. Goodbye.